He's going to sing, I'm going to dance.
But we will get started, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Keith Kelly, Commissioner of Labor and Industry, and Marty asked me to sit here if I would to introduce our speaker during this town hall meeting, just to say a few words, a very few words, to somebody who needs no introduction. But on January 3rd of this year, it was my good friend and transformational leader bestowed a great honor upon me as his Commissioner of Labor and Industry, of which the Office of Community Services is attached to for administrative purposes. I can't boss Margie around, but I do keep her books and do all those other things for her. So I got to sort that out, what administrative purposes means. But I was made Commissioner of Labor and Industry, and part of that, as I was given the charge to ensure that his message of "It's a New Day in Montana" is explicitly related to and implemented in the development of a Montana workforce for this century, for this state. So I must tell you that a part of that message at the time of January 3rd, Brian, that really stuck with me, is that he spoke back there in November and December during the transition to look out for the last and the least, and to get to come through the front door, not the back door. And that's really what you folks are involved here today, as I see it here. So much of your interest and involvement in volunteerism and in community leadership and community building is really based upon that, looking out for the last and the least. So let me in on this. What is a transformational leader? This is probably December 10th when that article was written. There was this farmer who has built a team, a farmer-rancher type, with dirt under their fingernails. We refer to this, Chuck Johnson, the Lee newspapers, referred to this governor-elect Brian Schweitzer, to now, 275 days later, this leader has transformed himself and been dubbed by the Rolling Stones as hot. So, ladies and gentlemen, my friend, your governor, Brian Schweitzer.
I don't know about the Rolling Stone. I have 3 teenage kids, and they would report to you that I go to bed at 9:30 at night and get up at 4:30 in the morning and read a lot of boring stuff and talk to a lot of boring people on the telephone. So I think my kids would say, not. Well, I applaud you because, as you know, our administration has been committed to the last and the least first. You know, the folks who can afford to pay their way to the front of government, they're being taken care of. You don't have to look any further than the last energy bill. You don't have to look any further than the thousands of lobbyists who represent the moneyed interests of this country to know that they're getting their share. If you can afford to pay your way to the front of the line, you get to the front of the line. We don't need a government to take care of the first and the most. We need a safety net to make sure that every single American has a safety net. Not just the ones who can afford to pay their way to the front of the line, but those who can't. Those that don't even know there's a line. And that's a great part of your mission, is to be that voice for those who don't have one. To be that voice for people who don't even know where to get in line. People, well, I gotta tell you, I'm a farmer, so I hear this all the time in farm and ranch country, and Keith Kelly, he served as the director of the Farm Service Agency in Washington, D.C. And across Montana and the rest of farm country, you hear farmers say, oh boy, we gotta get the government off our backs. The doggone government, they're poking their nose into everything we've got and giving all of this money to these welfare programs and giving it to these single mothers. Why, they ought to make it on their own. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the room with these guys and I'm thinking to myself, wait a second here, I can do a little math here. You farm 3,000 acres and about $25 an acre comes directly from the federal government. In fact, all over Montana, you know those baseball caps, farmers have them rolled up real tight, and you know why? So when they open the mailbox, they can get all the way in. but that, my friends, is not the government helping small farmers stay in business. That is a beneficial movement for those of you who consume, as they explained. But when there is a program that takes care of folks who aren't the ones who get to the front of the class in education, when we take care of kids who need a little extra help, when we take care of single mothers and help them get back to work, find a way for their children to get daycare, when we help families who have kids who have special needs, when we help communities pull together so that we can build our community, that's what we are in Montana. And it isn't always about dollars, but it takes some dollars. You understand that it takes people. It takes compassion. It takes leadership. And you have all of those. Now, Bruce Wittenberg has been involved in something that I think is a remarkable program. Actually, I think the impetus for this came from Wyoming. In Wyoming, 5 years ago or so, leaders said, we need to cultivate the next generation of leaders. We need to reach out to our communities and find people that haven't been involved in public service, people that have been running a business or raising a family or been teachers, but there's a spark in them. These are people that we need in public service. These are people that we need to cultivate as leaders in this state. Because Wyoming, like Montana, we are spread out by large distances, and oftentimes leaders don't know other leaders. And there's no one to mentor them. So the Leadership Montana program has been, I think you're on your third class now, is that right? Second class. We're the second class that we're graduating, and what they do is they reach out, and I'm going to let Bruce talk about it a little bit. They reach out and find leaders and nurture them. So come on up here and tell them about what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Governor. It's a nice surprise. I had a chance this morning to mention just a little bit about Leadership Montana, but more specifically, I'll give you some of the nuts and bolts. We have 46 people in the class this time. We graduated 38 last year. That's almost 80 people now that have made a huge commitment to Montana. And I'll tell you how big it is. There's a tuition involved with Leadership Montana. It's $2,500. That's a big commitment. Your travel and your lodging, you're responsible for. That's a big commitment. But more importantly, we go to 7 different Montana communities for 3-day sessions between September and May. That's a huge time commitment. So the folks that are involved in this program, this year we'll see, we started in Big Sky, we'll go to Kalispell next week. They're going to see Bozeman, they're going to see Havre, they're going to see Helena, they're going to see Great Falls and Billings during the course of this program. Last year we were in Miles City and Missoula, Butte, and they will see a lot of Montana. They will meet a lot of leaders across this state. But think about the commitment that they have made, and that's the thing that almost brings a tear to my eye to think of these folks that have stepped up and said, "I love Montana that much." So that's kind of a short version of what Leadership Montana is all about. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, Nancy Cooper-Smith has been involved in a program that actually measures and strengthens civic involvement. And I'd like you to come up and just visit with us a little bit about the program that you've been working on.
I'm way out there. Usually. Hi. Thank you, Governor. Well, I've been working with the Montana Commission for Community Service, chaired by President of the University of Montana, George Dennison, who's way in the back. And the commission gets to work with all of the AmeriCorps programs throughout Montana. And George opened our conference this morning with a welcome, followed by some remarks by Dan Kimmis, which were very inspiring and helped us to see a history of social capital and why it's so important for civic engagement. Then we went to the first plenary session, and we were, where's Brian Hurlbut? See here? There you are, Brian. Brian presented an overview of the 2005 report card on the state of community of the Rockies. Now, I didn't say that quite correctly. Let me say that again. A report of the 2005 Colorado College State of the Rockies report card. And what he did was examine, or what they did, was examine social capital in our region. They looked at civic capacity compared to rates of civic engagement in the 281 counties of the 8 states of this region. It was a fascinating report. I want to read the whole thing. I've only seen parts of it. But I think that Brian really set the stage for the rest of the conference. And asked the question, and it was really framed very well by Bruce Wittenberg, who was one of the 2 respondents to the report. And Bruce asked the question, why the gap between civic capacity and civic engagement? So I think that set the stage for the rest of the sessions that happened with the conference. The other Montana respondent to the report was Tracy McDonald, who is with the Salish Kootenai tribe, a member of the tribe, and also works at the college. And she really, I learned a lot this morning from Tracy. She told us that, of course, we know that some important values in Indian culture is valuing the elders and the youth. And she talked about how they are involved in civic engagement within the tribe. It was a fascinating plenary session, and it really started off the conference.
Well, thank you. That kind of sparks something else that we're working on at the state level. And as I travel across Montana and meet with leaders, and in particular meet with leaders in Indian country, I'm reminded over and over again that our corrections is filling up with all Montanans, but in particular filling up with folks from Indian country. And so when I visit with tribal leaders, I often hear about the concerns that they have with the young people that are being taken from their community and sent to Deer Lodge, and then they end up in and out of the corrections system as frequent flyers for the rest of their lives. So I was at the Blackfeet Tribal Council meeting one day, and we were talking about corrections, and I was answering questions, and I had the director of our corrections there, talking about parole, talking about pre-release, talking about Deer Lodge and billings for men and women. And then it dawned on me. And so I asked the open question to a room about this size, tribal council at the front. Tell me, what did you do with young men who were misbehaving for the 12,000 years before we showed up? What was your plan? And it was the doggonest answer you'll ever hear. One of the elders stood up and she said, well, Brian, we had the Crazy Dog Society. And so I say, what's that? And she said, well, when these young men, primarily, when they're acting up and the clan decides that they're doing things that is unacceptable to the rest of the clan, sounds like our corrections problems, right? We would send them away from the clan. And they would have to live with elders and a medicine man until such a time as those elders had decided that their heart was prepared to come back to the clan. Now there's a correction system. There's a correction system. There's one that is tailored for the individual. Because what's happening right now in our correction system in Indian country works like this. If you are a young Indian man and you are 20 years old and you and your buddies are driving around all afternoon drinking beer and maybe smoking a little pot, and you roll that pickup and you kill one of your friends, there will be a short trial, after which you will be sent to jail. Now, it'd be completely different if you were a white kid and your father owned the bank. It'd be a much longer trial, and you would get parole, and you'd probably graduate from graduate school and maybe go on to law school, and you will get your life back on track. But this young Indian man who made a mistake that day, he will be sent off to prison. And after a year or two, learning some very, very bad tricks from some very bad actors from the white community, he will be released to a pre-release center. Now the pre-release centers are only in the bigger cities because as part of success that we measure in a pre-release center is you've got to get a job and keep a job. So you're in the pre-release center every day, you've got to go up predictably, get up, go off to work, keep that job, 9 to 5, back and forth, everything's fine. Well, there's a couple problems here. Number one, they're not living in their own community. And number two, we're talking about Indian folks, they came from a community that views 9 to 5 work different than we do. It is not unusual for an individual from Indian country to show up for 11 days straight and then miss 3 days. It's not that big a deal, it just happens. Well, we're judging them on their ability to show up for work 9 to 5 every single day, week after week after week, and it's not going to work. And so what's going to happen? They're going to go back to Deer Lodge. And then they're going to let them out, they're going to go to pre-release, and out. So, I thought to myself, we've got 60% unemployment in Indian country. We have elders who are respected in Indian country. You'll see some teenage Indian guys, you know, they've got the gang stuff down, they've got the thick gold chains, they've got the bling bling down like they do on inner city. And the governor of Montana or any of you can walk in the room and they're going to diss you. They got no respect for you. But an elder, an Indian elder enters the room, and they are as calm as lambs. And they are respectful of elders, much more than we are in our society. So, I'm going to look into this crazy dog. So, when I got back to Helena, I called a federal judge, and I got Bill Slaughter, Director of Corrections, on the phone together, and I said, we're going to figure this thing out. We can't do much worse than we're doing right now. So we started looking into it. You know what I found out? That Manitoba and Saskatchewan both have been using the Crazy Dog Society model for years. Well, no one in the United States has done it. You know what that means? We're going to try it. So we sent our corrections up to Canada. We've been working with their folks. We're going to put together a hybrid system of a pre-release center. Because at the rate we are incarcerating young people in Montana, we will continue to gobble up our entire budget, locking the whole population up. Most of it has to do with drugs. But the bottom line is, we've got to do a better job. We have to do a better job with meth for the entire community, and we have to do a completely new system for folks in Indian country that is culturally appropriate. So, I think my challenge to you will always be, ask the next question. Challenge the status quo. Find those who are falling through the cracks and find a way to bring them back. That's what we can do on a day-to-day basis. That's what I expect you to do. Leaders who are working with the last and the least. Because if you don't ask that question, nobody will. You are the only one. You are the voice. Ask the question. Now, we have, I think Josh Vanek is here. Is that right? Let's talk about the Vista program. Where's Josh? Is he here? Come on up here. Come on up.
All right. Anything specific here?
Well, not everyone knows. Not everyone knows the genesis of the VISTA program. Not everyone knows where you're working, how many people are working in Montana, where they're working. So let's just talk about it a little bit.
Alrighty. Well, thanks everybody. The VISTA program in Montana. My employer is the Montana Campus Compact. George Dennison is also our board chair, and we're a higher ed consortium. We host the VISTA program, as does the Prevention Resource Center. So why don't we start with seeing a show of hands from Compact Vistas. All right, looking good. PRC Vistas, Prevention Resource Center. These folks are housed with the Department of Public Health and Human Services. Then we have the Legal Services Program, also a statewide VISTA program. A couple of you folks, yes? Represent yourselves. Communities in Action, based in Sydney. All right, lone representative. But I think there are 12 of you? 11, all right. VISTA is just over 40 years, started kind of parallel with the Peace Corps, volunteers in service to Montana as part of Johnson's War on Poverty. Now falls under the AmeriCorps umbrella. It's actually AmeriCorps asterisk VISTA. That's kind of our deal.
Well then, that's why I guess I'll call on Lindsay, because she specializes in telling what your deal is. So come on up here. Tell us how we are able to tell the story.
Okay. I guess as a VISTA, like the main purpose is just to build capacity and sustainability within an organization. Usually nonprofits have the opportunity to have a VISTA for up to 3 years, and so they can build the sustainability and capacity building through that. I guess with telling the story, it kind of went with the last session that just went on with people like Monty Dolak and 2 other people from the Great Falls newspaper, and also from NPR in Billings, and just talking about how to reach people from different generations through the media, through reaching them how to make them civically minded, how to engage them in opportunities that they might not be aware of currently, that provides them with even a great passion that they might not be aware of. Another thing, I think, one of the main things that was talked about in the last session was the meth issue. It was also how to reach different generations about that, and also how you said how some people might not think it affects them, or it might affect someone who lives in that area of town, whereas you live in a different area of town, or you're from a different socioeconomic background. How do we reach people like that? Also, just reaching people through different mediums. Usually a lot of the younger population, like college students, get a lot of their media information from the internet versus and other generations that come back from the newspaper or often the television news. So just kind of reaching out and grabbing people's attention and realizing that they can be civically minded even if they may already be civically minded even if they don't realize that they are already. So it kind of goes along with being a Vista with that plenary or that session over there. And yeah, is there anything else? Okay.
Some of you know a little bit about my resume. I've been in 27 countries around the world. I lived in Saudi Arabia for 6 years. Assalamu alaikum. And I've had an opportunity to compare our culture, our way of life, with a lot of other cultures around the world. In fact, the Saudi culture is probably the antithesis of our own. It is as alien to our culture as you can get on this planet. It's a very closed culture. But there's something that I have recognized in a lot of third world countries, whether they be Muslim or Catholic, like we have in Latin America, and that is that the generations are much closer together. They're much closer together spatially. They're much closer together emotionally. We're a fast-moving society. Grandpa and Grandma oftentimes live 500 or 1,000 miles away from their grandchildren. In these cultures of Latin America, North Africa, Islamic cultures, oftentimes you have a single compound or even the same home. And in that home is Grandpa and Grandma, and the grandchildren live there. Mom and Dad are all there. They're interconnected, generation to generation. And the respect for the senior generation and their ability to communicate to the next generations the lessons that they have learned is much greater than ours. And they are more grounded than we are. In our culture, we think nothing of picking up and moving every 3 or 4 years to a brand new community where we don't have family, where we don't have friends, and we build some kind of relationships in that community and then we move on. They are better at it than we are, and that is building the relationships between generations. We need to do a better job. It isn't necessarily that we can do it within a family, but we can do it within a community. We have got to find a way of re-energizing our seniors, re-energizing our elders to be involved in community service. They have learned a lot of lessons, and we need them to impart those lessons upon us. Now, with the baby boomers emerging, we have a gifted generation, well-educated, people that have moved the ball a long distance in a short period of time. And with improvements in healthcare, 65 years old is someone who's got a lot of energy left to give to a community. We have got to energize them. We've got to ask them to be involved. We've got to have them involved in our education system. We've got to have them involved in our food bank system. They've got to be involved in higher education, in K through 12. Where are all the mentors when it comes to reading? Do you ever see a child learn to read with Grandma and Grandpa? We've got to call on them to come to our elementary schools, to be involved as tutors. Why aren't we calling on seniors that we have in our communities that are geologists and chemists to be involved in our high schools, to come in and talk about how they made chemistry come alive? We're not doing that. So Amy Bush, I'd like you to come up and talk to us about reinventing the boomers.
Well, this is a good introduction to Senior Corps, which we haven't heard from yet. So I'd like to ask a show of hands of the RSVP directors in the room, and the foster grandparent directors, and the senior companion directors. So I think this group of people are making great strides in the state of Montana in addressing the baby boomers, but there's a long way to go. And Amy Thompson just did a wonderful session that we just attended on the baby boomers and civic engagement. And I realized right away when I sat down, oh my gosh, I am one of the baby boomers. I've always been the younger one in the crowd. But it really hit home on what she was saying was going to attract these baby boomers. And it's, when she made the comment, baby boomers are moving from successful to significant. And I think we reached the stage in life where, you know, success or all the money in the bank isn't really what's important anymore. It's what kind of impact I've made on this country and this state. And so I think that's really the kind of marketing tool we need to do to attract these people to come and work with us. They need challenging opportunities. No longer is it more satisfying to go to a senior center and do the arts and crafts. They want to be at the sheriff's department, logging in some of the evidence or helping them with really significant roles. And so we need to really be making strides in those areas. That's what we learned.
One of the things that we are doing different in this administration than any administration in the history of Montana is that we are reaching out to elected officials that aren't just legislators. When I say not just legislators, Gary, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but there are a lot of elected officials across this state that are leaders in their community. They don't serve in the legislature, so we don't see them come to Helena for a 90-day period and help make laws. But they are folks who are mayors. They are folks who are county commissioners. They are folks that are elected to our sheriff's positions. And more today than any time in history, we're calling on them and asking their opinions on what we can do better. Because those locally elected officials, they're hearing and they're seeing in each and every one of their communities what is important on that day. It takes a long time to get that information to Helena. In fact, Helena, many of you know, is really only about 15 miles from Montana. And there's a big fence around Helena that doesn't allow information out or in or services out. So we've taken a different tack. I'm spending a great deal of my time on the road meeting with mayors, locally elected officials, and in particular, county commissioners. County commissioners actually have the toughest job in Montana, even tougher than school board members, which is a very tough job. County commissioners are blamed for everything and get credit for nothing. That's what happens with county commissioners. You don't like your road? It was your county commissioner. Well, they actually are responsible for your road. You don't like your schools? You think it's your county commissioner. They're really not in charge of your schools. But when you're looking for a source in every county to pull together civic engagement, when you're looking for someone who can reach across state, county, and local resources, when you're looking for someone who knows community leaders and who's likely to take up a cause, go and see your county commissioner. Your county commissioners are on the ground, they know where the money is, they know how to make the courthouse work, and they are the ones who can reach into the community and draw leaders. So as you're trying to put together a new breed of civic engagement, talk to your county commissioners. We don't have a better example in Montana than a county commissioner, Mike McGinley, that we have here today from Beaverhead County. Mike, come on up.
I represent local government on this commission for community service, which I really appreciate you appointing me again here this year. When we were talking redefining civic activism, we met with some groups from the hometown Helena, the new group that got here in Missoula, the Missoula City Club, and also from Red Lodge, the Beartooth Community Forum.
The Missoula City Club, not the Missoula Club, because I know about that one. Not
The Missoula City Club, yeah, we gotta get that in there, right, yeah. But they are all community-based groups, non-political, getting together to put the issues of what's going on in their community and to be involved. And a lot of them were people that have been in the community a long time to see that their community is changing, and they want to be involved. And that's what the big part of being active in this thing is always about. Today, when we got to see the number of young people that were involved in this conference, it makes us really look tickled, because that's where the future is going to be, is the youth to be involved. I know in Beaverhead County we've got concerns with a lot of the service clubs of running short of service club volunteers. The Dillon JCs are short of members. But when we heard Brian talk today, he says that there's the upswing of volunteer hours coming out of the young people, so we should applaud that. The baby boomers that we stand there, I realize I'm one of them also, but they do belong in community service, or have been involved in community service where it's at. And Governor, also what Bruce was talking about is this program, this Leadership Montana, is doing the very same thing. It's uniting us in a way that we can trust each other to talk the hard issues, what's going to happen in the state of Montana. So when you hear an application coming out for Leadership Montana in the years to come, do look into it and take the step forward and be active in your community and join. So thank you.
Sometimes the things that we would like to accomplish in our communities gets waylaid, not on necessarily politics, but on hot button issues. And in Montana, if you're involved in some kind of community action and discussion of things that are completely different than a lot of other places around the country come up, you'll find out that people get very passionate about things that they don't get passionate in other places. For example, you want to get people worked up, start talking about changing hunting and fishing regulations in Montana. Really. In fact, if you really want to get people worked up, talk to them about a bison hunt, or not having a bison hunt. Or if you talk to folks in a community about changing timber management, or building more roads on public lands, or closing roads on public lands, or our schools. Are we going to teach so-called intelligent design, or are we only going to teach the theory of Darwinism? We want people to get worked up? We just started down that road. And people in Montana, like everywhere else, they are passionate about issues. And they're hot button issues. There are many things we can agree on in Montana. But when it comes to some of these tough issues, it calls on our inner soul to bring people together. Because as leaders, it is much easier to polarize than it is to draw people's best emotions out. It is much easier to get people fighting one another, and then you as the leader are the common bond that brings them together. That is not good leadership. In fact, that is the darkest side of human nature. We have got to bring people together. We need to talk about issues in a way that doesn't separate people. We need to talk about issues in a way that draws the best out of people, not the worst. The Montana Consensus Council, Judy Edwards, has been working on these exact issues, finding a way for people to work together and finding a common solution for common causes. So I'd like Judy to come up and talk about it a little bit. And by the way, get this bison and timber and road stuff worked out for me.
Thank you, Governor, and we'd be glad to help you with some of those issues. It was a great introduction to what I would have to say that the Governor just spoke on. We watched a video called The Fire Next Time, and if you haven't seen the PBS special, it films 2 years in the Flathead Valley, mostly around Kalispell, looking at initially the Project 7 group that was in there, the militia group, and then how that expanded into being more about racism, environmentalism, and all the isms that were dividing the community over 2 years. After we finished watching that, we used a couple of questions that the Consensus Council uses to bring people together to look at issues that are the hot button issues. We asked not what divided the people, what did they see different about each other, but what did you see in the people that were the same? What similarities, what common issues could you see the people talking about? We then asked, what perceptions do you think the group had about each other that were totally wrong, that we needed to have clarified? Then we asked what the shared needs might be in the community that people were missing. The group came up with things like, they all want a safe community. They want a good place for their kids to be raised. These were all issues that everybody agreed upon, but were not part of the hot button yelling at each other discussions. We then asked, what projects do you think people could get together around? And again, it looked at how we might make a safer community. It was interesting that someone pointed out that when he watched the video, every side was calling the other side, I mean, this one was particularly around environmentalism, and the logging people felt that they were the environmentalists in the community, and the others saw the timber industry as the anti-environmentalist, and each of them identified themselves as loving the forest and wanting to protect it. It was just the perception of how to do that was different, and that's where the issues came down around. So it was a good discussion about how you bring people together, how do you start the dialogue, and I think this is a great group of people to help start that dialogue about what do we share, what are our common values, what do we need to work together on, rather than how divisive we can be and continuing to yell at each other. So that's what we did, and we'd be glad to help you with bison.
Sometimes we have the greatest intentions. We've got a good group of people, and we decide that we collectively are going to improve a community. But you don't know all the tools that we have. You don't know what exists in the community. You don't know even how to begin. Where do you find people that would be involved? Where do we find people that can help us raise money? Where can we find a facility to conduct what it is that we're trying to do? So it's important for us to know what assets we've got, because if you don't know what tools you've got, it's very difficult to construct something. You've got to know what tools exist in each and every community, and you need to know how best to use those tools. There are lessons to be learned in the way to use these tools, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And Mark Shiraz has some ideas about how we can make these tools come together better for our communities. Mark, here? Yeah, come on up.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I didn't know I was going to have it. But I'm with the Montana Committee for the Humanities. We're one of quite a number of nonprofit organizations in Montana, and I have a very small message, but that's simply to look to the nonprofits in this state. There are many hundreds of them. There are some 700 in Missoula alone, I understand. These are the people who work for the common good. They don't get paid for it. They don't get elected. They do it just simply from the goodness of their heart and their interest in their communities and for their interest in the common good. So please do support the nonprofits of the state. Please join their boards, volunteer for them, do their good work, whether it's in social services or in cultural organizations such as I represent, or in other capacities. That's an important part of Montana. It's an important part of how we do things in the West, working together and reasoning together. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm heartened to see so many young people that are involved in community service. And building a level of citizenship at an early age. I'm heartened to see you here, and I'm disappointed to see so few of other folks your same age. I gotta tell you, I know the statistics, I'm a politician. My job is to figure out where there's votes. My job is to figure out how I can put together a coalition that is large enough to get about 220,000 votes and become the governor of Montana, and perhaps find those 220,000 and a few more next time to get reelected. So I, like a lot of politicians, we know who votes and who doesn't. And it may be frustrating for young people that politicians seem not to care about higher education funding, care not about issues that are important and are passionate, people that are young are passionate about, but they already know that 80% of you aren't going to vote. And they know that people with gray hair, 80% of them are going to vote. And so you see, when they see 5 seniors, they see 5 voters. When they see 5 people ages 18 to 30, they see 1 voter. So when they walk into a room, who do you think they're going to talk to? Who do you think they're going to listen to? Who do you think they're going to care about their opinion? Because ultimately, they've got to have those votes to win an election. When you don't show up, you don't count. When you don't show up, your vote won't be counted and your opinion will not be valued. So it is difficult to build and foster citizenship in young people because oftentimes it just doesn't seem to matter. It isn't relevant for their everyday life. And a lot of young people see the society as a whole as being too big, too complicated, too impersonal. What could they possibly do? But there are those of you here who have demonstrated what you can possibly do. There are those of you here who look at a challenge and say, maybe it's impossible, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do my part. Of course you can't build a structure, a building, an organization by yourself, but you can energize other people. You can spark other people. So I think it's important for us to find a way of fostering citizenship among young people, because that is a wasted resource in every one of our communities. It's frustrating for me, because if someone is 22 years old, they have close to 70 years to be accountable for decisions that were made by somebody else, close to 70 years to pay the taxes for mistakes that were made by the current generation. They have close to 70 years to, in a cumulative way, pay for mistakes that are made today. Someone who is 82 years old has 8 years to be accountable. And yet those with the most to gain and the most to lose are the least likely to show up. How do we energize them? How do we light that spark? What do we do to make it relevant for young people? What can you do? Now, Pat Murphy's been working on this, and we're going to hear some lessons.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, we had a fascinating discussion today talking about engaging young citizens in Montana. And we had a panel of distinguished panelists who have worked with youth. Gary Branny, a state legislator, June Atkins from OPI, Dean McGovern from the Montana Campus Compact, and Michael Umphrey from the Montana Heritage Program. And basically we talked a lot about the need to really start children young, as early as possible, getting them engaged in service. We talked about service learning and the fact that service learning increases community involvement, it increases academic achievement, and it also increases engaged communities, and the importance of really starting young with that. We looked at some really great projects that have happened in Montana. There's a high school program where students are working with oral histories and connecting with seniors in their communities. And that's a really great way to engage both the seniors as well as the young children. We talked about schools working with homeland security issues and learning techniques with disaster preparedness. And finally, we talked about the success of the Montana Campus Compact, who has 17 of the 21 higher education institutions in Montana involved in civic engagement in higher ed. We also talked about some recommendations that we thought were really important. One of them was that youth of today really want to connect with seniors, and they want to have mentors, and that's something that's happening with the millennial generation, which is, you know, the youngsters that are just now starting into higher ed. And we talked about just the fact that we need to nurture community service in the early years, and that's probably gets down to the basics.
Thank you. So most of you know that I am a rookie governor. When I arrived in Helena and I was sworn in on January 3rd, it is the first public office that I'd ever held. And so, as it turns out, the legislature comes to town on the same day that I'm sworn in. And being a rookie governor, I always get these things, maybe Gary can help me. Now, the legislature comes to town from time to time, and I never get the numbers exactly right. Some have said, and it appears at least for this first session, that they come to town for 90 days every other year. Or is it they come for 1 day every 90 years? I get them confused, and I know which one I prefer. But you may notice that I've changed as your governor. I've begun to get gray hair creeping into my head, and some of you assume naturally that gray hair is coming from a contentious 90-day session where appeared 150 legislators, had 150 ideas on how to spend money, and a separate 150 ideas on how to decrease revenue, lower taxes. You might think it was that session with all of those legislators with those interesting ideas, and with some 2,500 ideas we had to pare back to about 150 that actually made law. And no, it wasn't that at all. You might think it would be dealing with all the county commissioners across Montana, and each and every one of them would like more money for their county, and their counties need to be first when it comes to highway funds. It's not that. You might think that gray hair comes from, the journalists, the ones that are always digging around and poking and stuffing this thing in my face and say, "So, Governor, what about, where'd the money go for this, that, or something else? Or how come we're not putting more money in education? And why did we blow so much money on health care? And when are we going to get a better road coming through Billings or Bozeman?" You might think it's that's giving me the gray hair, but it's not. As I mentioned to you, I have 3 children, 3 teenagers, and my oldest boy, Ben, is 19, and then my next is Kai, he's 17, and then I have a 15-year-old daughter. Now, being the governor of Montana, in particular a rookie governor of Montana, I wouldn't expect people from across this country to call and ask me for advice about virtually anything. What the heck can I tell the U.S. Senate or Congress or the other governors or policy makers from across this country about virtually anything? But there is one thing that I am an expert on. You see, when that tropical storm started swirling around 1,000 miles off the coast of Florida, and on that fateful day when they named that hurricane Katrina, my daughter's name is Katrina. I could have given them some very, very good advice. Number one, her path will be unpredictable. She will arrive late, very late. Damage. There will be a lot of damage, things strewn about. And at the end, she will blame somebody else. They should have asked me. I could have saved them a lot of trouble. Listen, this is a great group. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or any of the presenters, anyone who spoke would be very happy to answer any questions, or I would be willing to respond to or just listen to any comments. So anybody who would like to seize this opportunity to ask a few questions or make a few statements or tell a good joke, this would be a great time. Yeah. And just identify who you are and where you're from and who you serve and favorite color and what's the name of your dog.
I'm Marvin Granger from Yellowstone Public Radio in Billings. You've been identified more than once among the new wave of Democratic leaders in the country. The Democratic Party has to do something about its future. Would you talk about that, your view of the Democratic Party's future at the national level? You've talked a bit about your values at the state level. What about the national level?
I'm a Democrat, probably more so because my grandparents and my parents were Democrats. But my grandparents were immigrants to Montana. They came here without a notion about parties. But they became Democrats, particularly in the 30s, when the Democratic Party became the party of ideas. Bold ideas, a new direction, a new day. And it is that mold that brought me to the Democratic Party. New ideas, a new way of looking at things, problem solvers. And it does appear to a great part of the electorate that Democrats have become reactive. And to be reactive means that you will not be relevant. Once again, we have got to be people with big ideas. We are the greatest country in the history of this planet. We've got to have big ideas about taking care of the last and least. We've got to have big ideas about education. How in the heck can a country like America be in a position where our math and science scores for seniors in high school are behind 27 other countries in the world? Now I'm going to tell you something that should shock you. Both China and India will graduate 1,000 more engineers per engineer in this country this year. 1,000 times as many engineers. They're coming here to study in our universities. They're studying at home. We used to be the place where we created new ideas, new technology. And now our entire country is becoming reactive. I watch on a national level, it seems like there's hot button issues that move things. Now, remember, there was someone who coined the phrase, it's the economy, stupid. Right? And it was the economy. And he had some ideas. In fact, he spent 8 years, and at the end of those 8 years, I don't know if he did everything right. I don't know if he did half the things wrong, but I know this. We cut the deficit in half, and we created millions of new jobs, and we had hope and opportunity in every corner of this country. That was big ideas. But we've lost our way. We've got to have big ideas about education. What about health care? How can we have infant mortality that's worse than 35 countries in this world right now? How is it that if you have money, you have the best health care anywhere in the world, better than they have any place in Europe or Japan? But if you don't have world-class health care. We need big ideas. How can we be in a position in this country to be beholden to energy producers in countries that would like to destroy our way of life? 58% of our oil comes from countries like, well, let's go through the list of rascals and rats. Start with our friend Alberta. They are our friend, and we import a great deal of energy from them, and they will continue to be our friend. We have a common cause, a common culture, a common border. All right, let's go out from there. How about Venezuela? Now Venezuela has a guy who is in power, Hugo Chavez, who likens himself to the next Castro, who's building a close working relationship with Castro. He's not our friend, he says so. How about Saudi Arabia, the place I lived for 6 years? 15 of 19 of those airplanes that flew into those buildings were piloted by people from Saudi Arabia, and they are the people that we've hitched our energy wagon to. Iraq, Iran, Libya, Angola, Nigeria. Any of them sound like they are cultural friends of ours? And then how about all those countries that end with Stan? Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all of them energy producers. Those people that are the big thinkers in our Department of Defense, they have the job, and it's not a very enviable job, but you're glad, believe me, that somebody's doing this. They're planning the next war right now. They're planning the war that is going to be the one that challenges our way of life right now. You're glad that they are. They're preparing for the kinds of arms and the kinds of training that we need in our military. And you know who the Department of Defense thinks that we're going to fight next time around? We're going to fight some place that produces our oil, or what we believe is our oil. We will be moving the 140,000 troops that we have in Iraq to someplace else that produces oil for our economy. We have become beholden to folks who would like to destroy our way of life. And when you filled up your car yesterday and last week, a part of that money went into the coffers of a dictator or a rat or a crook around the world who's putting some of that money in the pocket of some of these radical groups, Hamas or Al-Qaeda. And yet, we don't have any big ideas. We just passed an energy bill. And the energy bill does exactly what we've been doing for 30 years. We will continue to be dependent on those who would like to destroy our way of life. Where are the big ideas? No big ideas. Where was the idea that said, let us be like President Kennedy. Let us say 10 years from now, we will be wholly independent of any imported energy. Where was that vision that said, we are being challenged? Our country, our culture, our next generation is challenged to the very core. Where was that vision? Where were the big ideas? Where was that attempt to say, we will wean ourselves of foreign energy sources? We will begin a Manhattan-style project that says 10 years from now, we will be using biodiesel and ethanol and wind power. And yes, we will convert Montana coal, clean coal, so that we no longer have sulfur, mercury, and arsenic in our fuel. We can produce gasoline and diesel in Montana for $1 a gallon, converting coal to a clean, burning liquid with no emissions, zero air emission, zero water pollution. We can do that, and the technology exists, but we have been bankrupt in new big ideas. If the Democratic Party would like to be relevant again, we need to choose leaders and support them who have big ideas. We need leaders that challenge the status quo. We need leaders that will put people together for a common cause. That's what Truman did. That's what Kennedy did. And we've been bankrupt for the last dozen years. Sorry. Got on a rant like that is still.
Are there any more? This is your last chance to tell the governor how to do it and do it right. So here's your shot right here.
I just want to make a comment.
From
RSVP here in Missoula. And my comment is, big ideas, it looks like you have them and you are getting the attention across the country. When you have a little old housewife calling me to say, tell me about that governor and some of his ideas. I think that's pretty profound, and they're from out of state. So I think it's past the Democrats and the Republicans. I think the voting is telling you we're sick of politicians. We want people to take charge and help with the leadership. And I think all the people that are in this room are trying to find a way to solve some of these community problems. We're with you on that. But as for me, I'm sick of politicians. I don't want to be sold a bill of goods that really don't work or that don't mean anything. I want something that truly does work and is effective. And that's why I'm in volunteerism.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Or it's pretty hard to beat that one. Somebody else want to?
I'll help implement your big ideas.
Okay, here's an idea person over here.
That's what we need.
Yeah. I'm game.
Here comes a microphone for an idea.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I simply said that I'm willing to help with the big idea. Sign me up, just sign me up.
It is remarkable what a small group of people can do that are committed to a cause. You know, when Gandhi said, it's not right that salt that is produced here in India is taxed by the British government. We're not allowed to make our own salt. We're not allowed to mine our own salt. And Gandhi didn't pick up arms. He didn't shout at the top of his lungs. He stood up and said, today I am taking this small pot and I am walking to the ocean. And when I get there, I will fill this pot with salt water and I will put it on a fire and I will make salt. Because that is my right. And he quietly started his walk to the ocean. And before he got to the ocean, 250,000 people were with him. And those quiet people collectively made a sound big enough that India got their independence from England. That's the kind of leadership we need. Big thinkers that draw people together for a common cause. Thank you.
Governor, I'm John O. McKinney, Director for the Montana Conservation Corps. And young people flock to Montana to join our Corps to be civically engaged by helping the public lands, state lands here in Montana. And I'd like to hear from you if you have any ideas to share about what are some of the big ideas to help those people continue flocking to Montana, recognizing that this is the last best place with some of the most spectacular and precious public lands that really help to support our communities also.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that nearly 10 million people visit Montana every year. And they come here to visit the places that are the last best places. Those places, in many cases, that we don't have roads built on, that we haven't developed. And as time goes forward, some of those wildlands that are left in Montana, some of those places with pristine streams, some of those places that are the highest places in the mountains or across 3 or 4 drainages, they will become the most valuable places on this planet. And frankly, we will need, 50 years from now, we will need benchmark, because every place on this planet will have been disturbed in some way. Been digging there, been farming there, been grazing there, there's been human activity in some way. So 50 years from now, and maybe sooner, we are going to be looking for benchmark. What is the natural state? Where is a place that has not been disturbed? Because if we don't know what the natural state is, how can we restore those mistakes that we've made over the years? Now, attracting people to continue to Montana for the common cause, all we've got to do is get them to come here. Yeah. Once you get to Montana, you don't need to talk about it, you see it. It's in your heart. It'll be part of your spirit. And once people come to Montana, they'll never forget it. And once people have lived in Montana, they'll never want to leave. That's all it takes. What else?
Time for one more here, perhaps?
I was just going to say that as a testimony, coming from Southern California, born and raised and never experienced in the fall or winter or anything like that. I came here because of legal services, and I think AmeriCorps Vista is really good at recruitment because you turn your application the next day, they call you. And so kudos. But like you said, you experience Montana and you're forever changed. I just want to say, I agree.
Let me tell you one more story. Some of you know that one of the jobs that a governor does is if there's a judge who dies or if there's a new appointment to be made, a governor appoints a judge. And it works like this. You have a nomination commission, and they interview a lot of potential judges, lawyers, all, and they send 3 names to the governor. And then it's my responsibility and obligation to interview these potential judges. And so, again, I'm a rookie governor, and I've never done this before. I don't know how you do it, so this is what I did. I met with these individual attorneys who had been suggested by their peers that they would be good nominees to be a judge in Bozeman, and I asked them a few questions. And here's one of the questions I asked. I said, I don't win all the time. I lose a lot. And I found during my life that I always learned more by losing than I did by winning. So I said to them, if you would be so kind, would you tell me about a case that you lost? What did you learn? And what were the consequences of that loss? Two of these candidates described a case, and then they told me that they had learned some new techniques in the courtroom and that it made them a better lawyer, and that was the story. Lost, learned some new tricks, now I'm a better lawyer. One of them said, lost, learned some new things, and the consequences is that a family that I represented didn't adequately get their day in court. And you tell me which one of these individuals is going to be a judge. I also had one of them say to me in that questioning that it frustrated him because there are those who say that justice isn't equal. There are those who say if you don't have enough money that you don't get the same kind of justice. If you have a lot of money, you get better justice, or better justice for yourself. And that said, it frustrated him. He didn't believe that was true. I thought, where in the hell's this guy from? He thinks that poor people get the same opportunity in the justice system as rich people. He won't be a judge. We need people who sit in judgment of the rest of this community, who know the law, who understand the law, but have got a heart. Because most of the decisions they make are not between two neighbors that are suing each other, either over a fence or a rancher whose bull broke his leg and he's suing because another neighbor had too many gopher holes. Most of those cases will be family law. And there won't be a book, there won't be a case that tells them black and white what to do. We need judges who feel their community, who believe that justice is only served if they understand the consequences to each and every individual. If we find judges like that, we will be a better society. If we find judges who go through the motions so that they can get to the country club and hang out with their pals in the bar, we'll have a poorer system. Anyway, we have one more.
Governor, my name is Don Kettner, and I'm very honored to be on this commission, but also honored to also be chairman of the Montana Veterans Affairs Board. Now, Montana has led the nation for the last 15, 20 years per capita in the number of veterans we have in our state, and also the number of veterans that have volunteered in our present crises. What is the big picture in your mind of how we're going to take care of our veterans when they come back to Montana, who have all volunteered basically from being in the Guard and the service that they're in? As I said, we have 3,500 people in uniform for Montana right now.
I think there's a couple of distinct issues here, and that is when that recruiter speaks to that young person and tells them all of the benefits of joining the military. They'll talk to them about the ability of paying for their college education. They'll tell them about their opportunities, that they will learn a new skill, and that they may likely travel the world, and that they will meet new people and take on new leadership opportunities. They tell them all of those things, and they also tell them, and our medical package. If you serve in the military, we will take care of you. That's part of the deal. Well, unfortunately, they forget about that deal after they've left the military, and it's been going on for years, and we continue to cut veterans' benefits. For the life of me, I can't figure out why the Veterans Administration demands that you have to get your health care at a few central locations. Why can't an individual who's supposed to be reimbursed for health care choose to have their health care as close to home as they choose? Why do we force our veterans to leave their communities to go to centralized locations for their health care? It doesn't make sense. In fact, I don't think it's even been demonstrated to us by the Veterans Administration that they can deliver health care cheaper at these central locations than we can in our own communities. So that's I think, issue number one. We have a commitment, we need to live up to that commitment. And the second one is simply this. When we ask people to go to war, let's be square with it. I'll support a war. Many of you will support a war. For example, I'll be just totally honest with you. 15 and 19 of those rascals that flew into those buildings were Saudi. And they were led by Osama bin Laden, who is a Saudi. He is not liked by many of the Saudi people. He's hated by the royal family. Incidentally, he hated Saddam Hussein, and Saddam Hussein hated him because Osama bin Laden is trying to create a pan-Islamic government that crosses all of those borders and will be a theocracy. And Saddam Hussein was running a secular country in the middle of Islam states. So he was in Afghanistan. We sent troops into Afghanistan. We didn't get them yet. We should stay there. We should stay there until we finish the job. Because in the Arab world, they respect power. And when we allow this two-bit guy to run around and hide in caves, and the most powerful country in the world essentially gave up and moved on. That said, didn't matter to us anymore. We were on to a new issue. When we send young people into war, let's be square. This is in the interest of all Americans. This is a challenge to our society, like World War II. That's why we're there, and it is a cause that is good enough that every single mother in America understands it. Now, this is a great job that I've got. You've given me one of the best jobs in America, Governor of Montana. And every day I get up earlier and earlier, and I can't wait to get started because there's so many things to do and so little time to do it. But I'm going to tell you one bad thing about this job. And last Saturday, I was there again. Please, if you can give me the strength, if you can give me the words that I say to a mother when I'm helping her bury her son, her daughter, help me. I don't know the words. I don't know the words. Do I say to her, your son died making us freer? Protecting our liberties? I haven't yet. So I say to her, I don't know God's plan. We don't make God's plan. And we'll never know what the plan was. But I can tell you this, that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your son. And I know that this community is a better place because of your family. If you think of something better to say, some other words of comfort, help me with it. Because I'm not very good at it yet. What else?
Okay, one last question here if we can, and then we're going to recess for the evening. I think I'm looking over here, and I've been told, Governor, I know you're a pretty powerful man, but I've been told the schedule over there that's supposed to keep you on time is just more powerful than you and I put together. So I'm watching you. So one last question for Governor Brian here, and it's right here on the second row, and we'll wrap it up.
My name is Molly Collins, and I work for the Montana Campus Compact. I direct their AmeriCorps program. I work with Josh Vanek, who was up here earlier. My question is about innovative volunteering in the future. How do we get them? Internet. We have the tried and tricks, flyering. What is your thought on where volunteerism should go in Montana? The future of it?
Well, I think the first and best place to go is our schools. That's where young people are, and oftentimes you ask somebody. I talked to somebody today, just before I walked in the room, and asked him where he's going to school. Going here. What are you studying? Well, not sure. Well, a guy like that is ripe for the picking. In fact, I've said this before. And it's not very popular with parents and counselors and many times teachers. When I'm at a high school, I will speak to high school seniors, and so I'll ask them, I'll say, let's show of hands here. How many of you are planning to go to university next year? Maybe a third of the hands go up. How many of you intend to go to a college of technology next year? Some more hands go up. Good. And so now we're at maybe 40–50% of the class. And I say to them, I'm going to tell you something that you probably didn't hear from anybody else. I don't think you got to go to college next year at all. I think what you should do as soon as you graduate, you should get a job, and you ought to earn enough money that you can buy a backpack and a plane ticket and a little extra money and go someplace in the world where they don't speak your language, where they don't eat with silverware, where they don't pray to the God that you're used to praying to, where they have a completely different political system than the one that we have. Go there for 4 or 5 months. And when you come back, you will know more about yourself, your God, your community, your family, your government than you would have spending the next 7 years in college. Because most of you that said you're going to college, you're going to go waste your parents' money for the next year or two. You're going to take a bunch of classes that aren't relevant to you. Somebody asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have an uncle who's a lawyer, and you thought, I like him. I think I'll be a lawyer. You know somebody who's a microbiologist and say, I like little bugs. But you're going to change. You're going to change your curriculum. And the first year or two in college, you're going to find your way. And then ultimately, your parents and everybody around you is going to put a lot of pressure on you and say, my God, you can't be in college for the rest of your life. You cannot take every single course offered at this university. You've got to pick this thing out and get graduated, please. So about middle of sophomore year, you say, I'll be damned if I know what I want, but it looks like I have more courses in this area. I can plug them in faster and graduate in 4.5, maybe 5 years. All right, that's what's going on. But how about if we had community service? How about if you are not allowed to go from high school senior to freshman in college until you have been involved in some kind of service? That could be the military, it could be community service, it could be something involved with the Peace Corps, but something that gets your fat hind end out of your parents' house and takes you to a community where you have got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, who am I? Not that I am the third of 6 kids and my mother is Mary and my father is Frank and my neighbors are the Smiths. Who am I? What is here? That's the way we create great citizens. And it'll save us a lot of money too. So that is one way that we can start fostering citizenship at an early age. They do it in Norway. They do it in Switzerland. They do it in a lot of countries around the world. I don't know why the heck we have to learn from everybody else, but we do. What else? I guess we're done, right? All right, we're out of here.